Welcome to Creepypasta Tapes, a place where secrets live in dark corners, and rules exist for reasons you might not want to discover. And some families keep monsters out, others keep them in. Tonight's tape is about the thin line between curiosity and catastrophe, about the sound of something humming deep in the basement, and the silence that follows when it finally stops. Because sometimes the scariest thing we inherit are the things we're told never to open. So pull up a chair, listen close, and remember, some doors and some lids should stay shut. This is My Dad Always Warned Me Not to Open the Freezer in the Basement. Last night, I finally did. Chapter 1, Dad's Rule. My dad had only one rule in our house: never open the freezer in the basement. When you're a kid, your parents' rules seem random. Don't touch the stove, don't run into the street, stay away from certain places, even if you don't understand why. But the older I got, the more I wondered why my dad's eyes would go so cold every time he talked about the freezer. Our basement was old, low ceilings, concrete floors, slick with dampness, even in the middle of the summer, and in the far corner, tucked behind the furnace in a line of sagging shelves, stood the freezer, white enamel, chipped away in places, revealing rust like dried blood underneath. A thin layer of frost always clung to the edges of the lid. It hummed softly, that deep electric thrum that felt like it vibrated through the bones of the house. Sometimes, at night, I'd hear it through the floorboards while lying in bed, a steady pulse under the silence, almost like breathing. Whenever Dad caught me staring at it, he'd bark, "Don't even think about it," or sometimes, more quietly, as if afraid someone might hear, "Some things need to stay locked away." He never explained what he meant. Once, when I was 8, I got brave. Crept down there while he was outside mowing the lawn. I reached out, laid my fingers on the freezer lid. Cold shot up my arm like I'd touched ice water. Before I could open it, I felt a hand clamp down on my shoulder, so hard it left bruises. Dad spun me around. His face was pale, sweat on his forehead. Even though the basement was freezing, he knelt down so his eyes were level with mine. "Promise me," he whispered. "Promise you'll never open that freezer." I nodded, tried to pull away, but he just held on, eyes shining like he might cry. Then he let me go and walked upstairs without another word. After that, I avoided the basement, tried to pretend the freezer wasn't there, but sometimes when I had to go down there for holiday decorations or flip the breaker, I'd feel it, a chill in the air, deeper than winter, a faint metal tang like blood frozen in snow. Years passed. I moved away, started my own life, but whenever I came home, the first thing I'd notice was the freezer's hum in Dad's eyes, following me as I passed the basement door. I wish I could say I left it alone forever, that I honored that promise I made when I was 8, but curiosity, it doesn't stay locked up forever. And the night the freezer went silent, I knew I was going to open it. Chapter 2, Dad's Decline. Then Dad got sick and the freezer stopped humming. Sometimes the scariest part of growing up is realizing your parents aren't invincible. One day, the rules they set become yours to keep or yours to break. It started slow. A cough that wouldn't go away, shakes in his hands when he tried to hold his coffee cup, a distant look in his eyes like he was already drifting somewhere I couldn't follow. He stopped going down to the basement. He used to go down there every week, sometimes more. Sometimes I'd hear him moving boxes or feel the heavy thud of something shifting on the concrete floor. But after he got sick, the basement door stayed closed, and the freezer, its hum grew softer, like it was winding down. One night, I woke up to silence. No soft vibration under my bedroom floor, no gentle electric thrum that had always been there, even if I tried to ignore it. I went into Dad's room. He was setting up in bed, staring out the window. His skin looked gray in the glow from the street light outside. His breathing shallow. He didn't look at me when I said his name. Finally, he whispered, "You hear it too, don't you?" I froze. "Dad, the freezer's off." His eyes shifted towards me. Then they were glassy. He swallowed hard. Some things stay asleep as long as they're cold. I tried to ask him what he meant, but he just turned away, pulling the blanket higher around his shoulders. I stood there a long time, watching his shoulders tremble like he was shivering, even though the room felt warm. The next day, I went down to the basement. The stairs creaked under my weight. The air was still and damp. When I reached the bottom, I listened. Nothing. No hum, just silence, so thick it felt like I'd gone underwater. I walked over to the freezer, put my hand on the lid. It was ice cold, but it wasn't vibrating anymore, and somehow that made it feel more alive, like it was listening for me. Shadows seemed longer down there, stretching across the floor like fingers. The furnace made a single metallic pop. that echoed like a gunshot in the quiet. I backed away, took the stairs, 2 at a time, my heart hammering in my chest. But upstairs, Dad was worse, barely speaking, drifting in and out of sleep. And as I stood in the hallway, looking towards the basement door, I felt it, a pull, like gravity itself, was dragging me back down those steps. Dad's rule used to keep me safe, but now he wasn't strong enough to enforce it anymore. And the night the freezer went completely silent, I knew I was going to open it. Chapter 3, The Descent. I waited until everyone was asleep and went down into the dark. The steps creaked like bones under my weight, and with every one I took, I felt like something was holding its breath, waiting for me to come closer. The clock in the hallway glowed, 2:13 a.m. I'd been lying in bed for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening for any sound that might talk me out of what I was about to do. But the house was silent. Dad hadn't stirred. Mom hadn't gotten up for water. The quiet was so thick, it felt like wool stuffed into my ears. I slung my legs out of bed. My bare feet hit the floorboards, cold as ice. I crept to the door, turned the knob slowly, held my breath. The hinges didn't squeak. The hallway felt longer than usual. Walls closing in around me. The shadows clung to the corners like dark, wet stains. I passed Dad's door, paused. He was breathing softly, almost a wheeze, but he didn't call out, didn't say my name. I reached the basement door. The brass knob felt colder than anything else in the house, like it had been resting in snow. My fingers wrapped around it. I hesitated, waited for some voice to stop me, but there was only silence. I twisted the knob, pushed the door open. A wave of cold air rolled up the stairs, smelled of damp stone, and something older, like earth, that hadn't seen daylight in decades. I stepped onto the top stair. It groaned under my weight, the sound echoing into the basement below. 1 step, 2. The further down I went, the heavier the darkness seemed to press against my skin. My eyes strained, trying to adjust. Faint light spilled through the crack under the basement window. Dust hung in the air like glittering snow. Every surface was covered in cobwebs that glistened with beams of moisture. I reached the bottom step, stood there, just listening. Water dripped somewhere in the shadows. A pipe gave a single metallic tick. The freezer loomed in the far corner, white paint peeling, rust spreading like bruises across the surface. Dad used to stand in front of it for minutes at a time, staring at the lid like he was waiting for it to move. Sometimes he'd whisper things under his breath, too quiet for me to hear. Other times, he'd grip the edge of the freezer so hard his knuckles turned white. I moved closer. Dust poofed up around my feet. Frost had crept out from under the lid, tracing white veins around the concrete floor. I reached out, laid my hands flat on the lid. Instant cold shot up my arms, so sharp it felt like needles. I jerked back, but curiosity pulled me forward again. My fingers brushed the handle. I closed my eyes for a moment, tried to remember Dad's voice, warning me away, but it felt too late for warnings. And that's when I heard something moving inside. Chapter 4, The Lid Lifts. I should have turned back, but my fingers kept lifting the lid. It's strange how fear makes you pause, and yet also forces you forward. Like you'd rather face the monster than spend your life wondering if it's real. I stood there, hand resting on the freezer lid, heart pounding so hard I could feel it behind my eyes. The sound came again, soft, shifting like fabric rubbing together, except muffled under layers of ice. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting Dad to be standing there, eyes wild, hand outstretched to pull me away. But the basement was empty, just me, the freezer, and the darkness. I tightened my grip on the handle, pulled. The lid resisted at first. The rubber seal clung to the rim, groaning like an old door in a storm. I almost let go, but then the seal gave way with a wet pop. A blast of air burst out, so cold it made my skin ache. My breath fogged in front of me, clouds drifting like ghosts in beams of basement light. And then the smell hit me. Metallic, sharp, almost sweet, but underneath it, something else. Something sour, like meat left too long in the dark. I gagged, covered my mouth with the back of my hand, but I couldn't look away. Frost coated everything inside the freezer, a thick layer glittering like sugar under the pale light. I leaned closer. Shapes lay under the ice, pale mounts, some round, some too angular to be food. I scraped at the frost with my fingertips. Crystals cracked under my nails. A patch cleared, revealing something smooth and white, bone white. My stomach flipped. I brushed away more ice. A shape emerged, thin, human-like, an arm, fingers curled stiffly against the chest. I stumbled back, knocking into the shelf. A paint can clattered to the floor, echoing like a gunshot. Memories flashed through my mind. Dad grabbing my shoulder, his eyes frantic. "Promise me, you'll never open it." I looked down into the freezer. Another shape shifted, slowly, almost like it was breathing. My teeth chattered as I leaned closer. Details sharpened in the frost. Sunken cheeks, skin stretched thin, eyes sealed shut under a glaze of ice. I reached out even as every instinct screamed to run. My fingertips hovered inches above its face, and then one of the frozen shapes slowly opened its eyes. Chapter 5. Faces in Ice. Its eyes were human, but wrong. You'd think you'll scream in moments like that, but sometimes your voice just dies in your throat because your brain can't accept what you're seeing. The eyes stared up at me, clouded and milky, veins spidering across the whites like cracked porcelain. At first, they didn't move, just opened, vacant, but then they shifted ever so slightly, locking onto mine. I stumbled backwards, hitting the freezer's lid. Cold seared my palms. I wanted to run, wanted to scream, but my legs wouldn't obey. Its face was sunken, skin stretched so thin I could see the shape of the skull beneath. Pale lips pressed together, splitting slightly as frost fell away in delicate shards. And then I realized something worse. It wasn't alone. Shapes shifted under the frost beside it. Another face pressing forward beneath the ice. Eyes closed, mouth wide as if in a silent scream. Then another and another. The frost bulged outward like the freezer itself was breathing. Cracks of ice spidered across the surface as pale skin and fingertips began to push forward, bumping against the walls of their frozen prison. Memories flashed through my mind. Dad's face, white with fear. The way his voice trembled whenever he said the words. Some things need to stay locked away. My chest tightened so hard, I thought my ribs would break. This wasn't madness. Dad hadn't been insane. He'd been trying to protect me. I stepped closer, even as tears stung my eyes from the cold. Frost formed on my lashes. My breath drifted around me like smoke. The first figure's eyes followed me, its pupils cloudy, but somehow aware. Its lips parted, skin cracking as they tried to move. A faint hiss escaped. No words, just air sliding across frozen vocal cords. I leaned in, drawn by a mixture of fear and a need to know. I could almost hear something beneath the hiss, a pattern, a rhythm, as though it were trying to speak, or warn me, or beg. Suddenly, the other faces pressed closer, cheeks smearing against the ice, mouths opening and closing in silence. Their eyes rolled wildly, darting from side to side. The entire freezer seemed to pulse, each push from within sending ice cracks across the icy surface. I reached out again. My fingers hovered just above the frost. My skin burned with cold, numbness creaking up my wrist. And then the first figure's lips began moving in earnest, forming silent words. I strained forward, trying to hear, trying to understand, and then the ice began to crack. Chapter 6. The Break. I heard the first piece of ice snap, like a bone breaking. I wanted to slam the lid shut, to seal it all back inside, pretend I'd never seen it, but some part of me needed to know, needed to see what my father had been hiding all those years. The crack echoed through the basement like a gunshot. A thin, white line spidered across the frost, spreading, branching, splitting the ice apart in tiny, jagged paths. I staggered back, nearly tripping over a stack of paint cans. My breath fogged in the freezing air. The temperature seemed to drop with every second. My fingertips stung. My skin tightened until it felt like paper tearing over bone. From inside the freezer, the whispering grew louder. At first, it was just dry air sliding through frozen teeth, but then I began to hear words, not in English, not in any language I could recognize. A hiss, a chant, something rhythmic and dark. Another crack ripped across the ice. A flake of frozen frost fell away and hit the concrete floor with a tiny, delicate clink. Suddenly, something moved inside. Black shapes pressed against the frost, like hands reaching for the lid, fingers long and crooked, their tips blackened and brittle, like burnt wood. I stumbled back further. The cold was so sharp, my eyes watered instantly. It felt like I was breathing in shards of glass. The metallic smell from before was stronger now, mixed with something almost sweet, a smell like rotting fruit, thick enough to make me gag. I stared down in the freezer as the ice kept splintering. Hairline fractures spread over pale faces, still trapped beneath the surface. One mouth open wide and held there, frozen mid-scream. The fingers began to push through the cracks, splittering ice crumbling around them. Bits of frost fell away like glittering snow. A voice rose from inside, soft, dry, scraping against the darkness. It spoke just one word, my name. It almost sounded familiar, like my father's voice echoing up from the bottom of a well, or like something trying to sound like him. My body went rigid. The urge to run fought against something deeper, a strange pull, a weight pressing into my chest, as if begging me to stay. I tried to tear my eyes away, but I couldn't. The whispering voices echoed off the basement walls, layering over each other until the air seemed to pulse. That's when I realized the truth that made my stomach turn. These weren't just bodies trapped in ice. They were still alive, or something close enough to it. And as frost fell away from the figure's face, its eyes opened wider, its cracked lips parted, and in a voice dripping with hunger, it spoke again. And I realized Dad's role wasn't to protect himself, it was to protect me. Chapter 7. The Truth. Dad's voice filled my head, even though he wasn't there. Sometimes love means keeping secrets. And sometimes it means locking monsters away, even if those monsters were once human. I stood frozen beside the freezer, watching the ice split open, listening to voices whisper my name, and then, in the middle of the swirling cold, I heard Dad's voice. It was as clear as if he was standing right behind me. I tried to protect you. It wasn't supposed to stay locked away. I couldn't let them out, even if they used to be people. My eyes welled with tears because part of me wanted so badly to turn around and see him standing there, strong, alive, ready to fix it all. But I knew he was upstairs, sick, fading. Another crack burst across the ice, loud as thunder. A piece of frost tumbled away, revealing more faces, pale, gaunt, eyes rolling under thin lids. Their lips quivered, forming words that scraped the air like dry leaves skirting across concrete. The nearest figure leaned closer, its eyes locked on mine, the milky irises swirling like smoke.
"He lied to you,"
it whispered, its voice layered like dozens of people speaking through the same throat.
"He trapped us. We were like you once."
I shook my head, my breath billowing in clouds. Dad's voice echoed again, interlaced with my own thoughts. They weren't people anymore. Don't listen. Don't believe them. The wind whipped through the basement, cold enough to cut my skin. Loose scraps of newspaper and cobwebs spun in frantic circles around me. Another figure pressed its face to the opening. Its skin was stretched thin, veins dark against the white flesh. Tears of ice clung to its lashes.
Help us.
It gasped.
"Let us out, and we'll show you the truth."
Visions flashed across my mind. A circle of people chanting around the freezer. Blood splattered across the concrete. Dad holding a knife, his hands trembling. The thing inside the freezer screaming like a woman and a beast at once. My pulse roared in my ear. I stumbled backwards, nearly slipping on the frosty floor. The first figure's cracked lips curled into something almost like a smile.
"Your father stole our lives. Now you owe us yours."
The voice surged, raising into a chorus of wails and pleas. My father's voice cut through it all, thin and desperate. "Close it! Seal it! Please!" I clamped my hands over my ears, tears freezing on my cheeks. My chest ached, like my heart was splitting apart, even as Dad's words echoed in my skull. I felt the pool of figures in the ice. Part of me wanted to believe them, to know the secrets Dad had buried. One of them reached out, frost snapping from its fingers, and whispered,
"Help us, or become one of us."
Chapter 8. The Choice. And in that moment, I realized the freezer door swings both ways. Some truths don't set you free. They chain you tighter than any lock. My hands covered over the freezer lid. The figures inside stared up at me, their eyes shining like wet marbles under the flickering basement light, their breaths misted against the frost, thin lips moving into silent words I both wanted and dreaded to hear. The freezer hummed beneath my fingers, not the steady mechanical hum I'd grown up hearing, but something alive, pulsing, throbbing like a heartbeat deep in ice. The voices rose around me, a chorus of desperate whispers.
Let us out! Your father betrayed us! We can show you the truth! We can make it stop hurting!
Visions hit me like flashes of lightning, buildings collapsing under clouds of dark frost, people screaming as pale hands reached for them from the shadows, a river of ice flooding the streets. I squeezed my eyes shut, tried to block it all out. Dad's voice cut through the storm in my head. Don't listen. They'll twist your thoughts. They're not what they pretend to be. But another voice, soft, almost kind, slid under his like silk.
We were human once, like you. We don't have to hurt anyone. All we want is warmth.
My throat tightened, tears blurring my vision. I thought about Dad, standing in the basement all those years. His knuckles were white on the lid, his eyes hollow, carrying a secret so heavy it crushed him from the inside out. Was this my burden now? Was I supposed to keep this locked away forever? Or was that cruelty worse than anything they might become? The freezer vibrated harder. Frost rattled off the edges like hell. Once, one figure pressed closer to the crack in the ice, its face so close I could see each split in its frozen lips.
Help us,
it whispered,
or become one of us.
My shaking hand lowered towards the lid. Part of me wanted to slam it shut, to bury the secret, to keep Dad's rule alive. But another part wanted to know, wanted to see what he'd been hiding. The figures inside leaned closer, their fingers scraping ice like nails on glass. My breath hitched, my hands covered. And now, every night, I wonder if I shut that lid tight enough, or if something else slipped out into the dark. If you're still listening, be careful what secrets you open. Some doors and some freezers don't stay shut forever. Subscribe for more stories from the shadows, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done? Thanks for tuning in to Creepypasta Tapes. New stories drop every week, each one a step deeper into the dark. Share this with someone who thinks all monsters belong in fairy tales. And remember, some rules exist for a reason. Until next time, keep your lights on and your lids closed.